Hello. Today we're going to talk about how to create a show file. Again, topic is very important, and it's it's gonna set you up for a win when you are doing your event or gig or whatever you're doing. This I'm gonna show you how I do it, and then hopefully it gives you ideas on how to prep yours and how to save time, especially. So let's get into it. Now, before we start, a big thing to understand is that every console is different. So now I'm gonna show you an example. I'm gonna use a CL5 as an example. But there is always gonna be a fight over what console is better than others. But I suggest you to find the console that makes you feel comfortable and helps you to accomplish your job. Now, remember, a console is not gonna create a mix for you. A console is just a tool. It's not the talent. You are the talent. So now, to produce a result in the console, then you need to learn them. And then how are you going to learn them? So you need to pretty much study them. So by mixing on them, asking people about them, and reading the manual for sure. So let's start with some basics. So here, I'm gonna use our patch list, the one we use for our how to create a patch list video, and we're gonna do that. Again, reminding, I'm gonna use a CL5 as an example. So I just downloaded the CL editor, and lets you do everything. It's pretty much the whole software. It's just there's just no surface on it. But yeah, okay, so. Again, so we see our patch list, our output patch in here. Now I create a little file, like a sheet in here that says as the console prep. So I pretty much put all the layout of the console. So what I did, I put all the mono channels. So my CL5 has 72 channels, mono channels. 8 stereo channels, and I put them in their respective layer or button. So if you look at a CL5, you have the buttons, and each like in each layer in the left side, you can have 16 channels. So you see here, and then in the middle section you have all your buses, all your matrices, subgroups, auxiliaries, stereo groups, things like that, and they are in bank of 8. And you have your DCAs too. Now, a few things to do is just to think about is layout. Your layer is really important. It's gonna help you to be quick when you do a job, and you need to be able to find a channel as fast as possible to make changes if you need to. But yeah, so a few things before you do actually start typing stuff into the offline software, you need to ask yourself some questions. A few things like, do I have a patch list? Is it almost finished? What am I missing on that patch list? How many channels do I need? How many mixes do I need? Do I need mono or stereos? Now, in this case, because we're using CL5, a CL5 is just this is the amount of channels you have. This is the amount of buses. But in other consoles like Digico, Allen and Heath, you can actually do. You can actually change this, how many buses you have, how many channels you need. So before you start configuring all your file, then you need to have all that stuff written down and be prepared. How many groups do I need? Am I gonna be stemming everything? So are you sending for example, your drums to a drum bus group, and then that one to a band group, or are you just sending just your drums to your left, right? Again, all these little things you're gonna need to make decisions regarding your setup and how complex you want it. Like again, console file can be super complex, but you gotta think about like in a few things that I do for my team. Sometimes I gotta actually compromise some of my decisions to make it simpler for them. Now, if you are just an engineer that just does touring and you are the man, so you do whatever you want on your show file. But when you are sharing console with someone, then you actually gotta think about all those things. Is the layout comfortable for other ones, for other people? That's why I create this, so that sometimes I do this so that I can send it to people and say like, hey, what do you think about that? You think this could work? Does that make sense? Is it easy to understand? Is it simple? And things like that. And I keep tweaking it even before I start typing stuff into the software. But yeah, anyways, I pretty much filled everything. But yeah, I'll explain what I've done. You need to ask yourself like, what audio feeds do I need to provide? So do you need to do you need to provide feeds for the PA, subs, front fields, a control room, a parents room, a record, a program feed, all those little things you need to ask yourself. Again, as I said, what are you prepping for? For a tour, for an install, for training purposes, what other things? Yeah, so just little things like that you gotta consider. And again, pre-production is a key. It's key for building a file. So again, what we're doing is the pre-production. So we're not touching this. We're not touching any of the software yet. But yeah, we're just writing everything down. So let's see. Okay, let's get into this example. So I filled everything here. So I said I tap everything here. And you might be asking, why do you leave all these gaps in here? Now, okay, so creating a file is not. When I create a file, I think about I created like future, like for the future. So I don't want to think about what is helping me for now, like at the moment, but I actually want to be like, what if the band decides to add an extra line or stuff like that? So I need to be able to leave gaps here and there. Again, if your console is like really packed, like I don't know, like if you have 120 inputs and you're using them all, then you need to be more specific on where to put stuff. But when you have, like, for example, in this case, a CL5 and it's like overkill for this band, so you can play, you can have that spacing in here. So yeah, think about what could happen in the future. So the band might ask, they might add a bunch of extra track lines, a bunch of stuff. So a vocal mic, again, same thing. I left a gap in case what if he decides to have a BB now or another vocal, and I put a vox pair in there just in case. We put MCs and then gaps, like this is all free. And then I decided, okay, how many reverbs do I want? So I type it all in. Why did I put in the stereo? Again, the stereo, because in the CL5 the stereos are stereo, so you can unlink them. So I decided, I might as well I just put all my returns in there because they're stereo. But I could have just put them somewhere here. But again, as I said, I gotta think about future. Imagine if for some reason this artist wants to go like a orchestra kind of style, so then it will require me extra inputs in here. So I need to be able to have all that free. Okay, and then I put the iPod, and then the like videos. Videos, if they want to play replay, and then ambience, like to record or to send to the band, whatever. And again, all that stuff is in the input patch, and then it's all pretty much labeled. Where do I want it? There's a few things in there that is missing, so but let's do it now. Okay, so that's in there. Okay, so going back, so in here in the in the bosses section, there's a lot of things for you to consider in here. In the bunch of consoles, you have the option of having a group or an auxiliary. So now you need to understand why choosing an auxiliary, why choosing a subgroup or a matrix, whatever. So I'm gonna just explain really quick. So an auxiliary is like commonly used to create monitor mixes. So there is two ways to send a channel to an auxiliary. So pre-fader or post-fader. So I'm gonna explain it visually. So these are your sends in here. So that's your channel. So pre-fade means that this fader won't affect the send going to the auxiliary. So you can move it up and down this, and then the send is still constant. Now in a post fader mix, this fader will affect that send. So if you have at 0, then the signal at 0 on the auxiliary will be 0. So if I move it to -10, then it will be -10 output on your auxiliary. So yeah, again, just things to consider why you want to choose. I choose pre-fade, for example, for monitor mixes that you don't want to, like, for example, if you're mixing front of house and monitors in the same console, then you want probably all your outputs, so all your inputs in pre-fade, so that when you are mixing front of house, your movements won't affect their ears. So yeah, things to consider there. So for example, all my effects, I want them post fade, because when I bring the fader at 0, I want them to come down to. Okay, and a subgroup. So a subgroup, it's a mix bus group that is fed by the output of the channel. So the output of that channel goes to a subgroup, and again, whatever you feed into that group. So again, as I said, in this case scenario, I'm gonna do an example of we're gonna stem every single like instrument. So we're gonna create a stem of drums, a stem of bass, stem of guitars, just because I want to have it. Like, you don't need to do it, but it's always good to have all that being. You need flexibility. Like, what if for some reason the artist asks for, oh, can I have the guitar mix, and then you're like, oh, hold on, I didn't record it. So you need to be prepared for all those little things. Or like the drum kit, like, I don't know, like the drummer, for example, typical, right? Like the drummer recorded, like he put a little GoPro, and he's doing his Instagram videos, and he asks you, and he's like, hey, do you think I could get the drum mix from your console? And you're like, sorry, I just have the full band mix. And then he's gonna be like, no, thank you, or stuff like that. Okay, so, and then the matrices are pretty much commonly used fits that go, like outputs that go to, for example, a PA, Foyer, near fields, RTA, records, etc. This type of bus usually has like a built-in mixer, so you can actually mix things into that mixer. In the CO5, pretty much a matrix works like an auxiliary, pretty much. But in other consoles, it's different. Different consoles, you actually can't send a channel. Like, you need to add a channel to the mixer so that you can actually output into the matrix. Okay, so, and of course VCAs or DCAs, which are like stand for voltage control amplifier or digital control amplifier. So they pretty much control the faders. So I'm gonna give you an example here. So that's my drums, right? So when you put at 0, all that. So that's my VCA. So if I move this fader at minus infinity, here what the computer is doing is pretty much bringing that fader down. Now you don't see it because it's a like it's it's a software thing. But there's some consoles that you have like like Digital, like has the VCA style that you can do that. Like you can, every time you move this fader, all the faders attached to that will come down. Now there is no signal going through this group or DCA. Like it's just a control. It's controlling the faders of that, which helps you, like for example, to have a the whole drum kit in here, like the whole band fader in one, and things like that. Yeah. So okay. So now that I filled in here, I decided in this example we're gonna creating a little bit of a clever routing for you, just to have a if you want to do, for example, parallel compression and CL5, it is possible. You just gotta route a few things different. But in this case, so I type, okay, what do I want? What buses I want to be a group? Which buses I want an auxiliary? And you see everything's organized. So why did I put in the effects in here? Now I want them separated from the groups, so it's all easy to understand. So when I change a layer, so if I'm layer 3, then it's just my auxiliaries. When I'm layer 1 and 2, it's all my groups, and my layer 4, it's all my matrices. So it's very simple, very organized. Again, I don't want to have, like for example, a drums group and then an auxiliary in the middle and then another group and then another auxiliary there. It just doesn't make sense. When you're like, look, if someone jumps in on your file, it needs to make sense for other ones. Especially like me personally, I gotta think about a team. It's not just about me. So my goal is to make sure they understand and it's simple for them. Again, it all depends what you do as your daily work. So if you're just a front of house engineer, then do whatever you want. But if you are just a team builder or leader, then you gotta actually think about these little things. So I type everything, so I'm stemming everything. So my drum bus clean, my drum bus compressor, a bass stem, guitars, keys, tracks, vocals, MC. Now, why do I like to stem everything? I just do it like so there's a few reasons. Sometimes I like to stem everything because I like to put processing in each group. So especially when you're running a lot of channels, let's just say, and you just want to bright the whole guitar group, then you just do it to the group and not individual channels. Or like the drums, if you want to just put a little bit of like top end on it, so you do it in the group instead of going to each single thing. And on second option is like, you pretty much, once if you record all the stems, you can remix all your mix pretty much. So if your mix was like didn't have that many guitars, then you can actually, by just boosting the group, then you will have more guitars in the mix, instead of getting all these multi-track channels and then remixing it. Like if your front of house mix is good, it should sound pretty good. It's just a little volume things here and there that will help to, like, again, if the artist asks you for the front of house mix, probably if you give them the front of house mix, it's not gonna sound that good. Well, it depends what type of venue. And a good example is like, smaller the venue, the less things you're gonna put on. For example, if there is a rock and roll event in a smaller room, and the guys have guitar amps on stage, you probably don't want to put more guitars on the mix because it's already freaking loud in the room because of the amps. So then if you listen to your mix, it's pretty much gonna be like no guitars. Now if you send that to the artist or whoever is asking, you're probably gonna get fired, because they're gonna be like, oh, this guy is not even putting my guitars in the mix. So yeah, again, having the stems, you can actually remix your whole mix and then give it to the artist, which is pretty cool. And then in here, so I have my outputs and then program feed. Again, same thing. The program feed, you can actually, boost a little bit of the MC microphones in that mix, because usually the MCs are a little bit quieter than a drum kit or like guitars, and things like that. And yeah, again, all this work you need to do it like even before we touched the software. And once you're kind of happy with all this, then you can start typing things into your file in here. So I pretty much did. So I pretty much fill everything for you so that you can have a look. But I went and put everything in the right place, in here, accordingly to that. So that's pretty much that. And I already patched it all in, So if you go to your input patch, if it says, okay, Vox, the vocal is on Rio 24. So if we go, I know it's channel 33 here, but it's patching 24. So it's already patched. When you load your file, you're gonna get that file, that channel into that hole. So it's good. Okay, so another things to consider here. So once you do kind of all the labeling and all the work, like some consoles you gotta configure, like okay, your mix buses, you want stereo or mono, or like do you want them as an auxiliary? So I've done all that stuff. So you select what you want by just following what you've done here on your pre-work. Okay, so let's go back to our channels. Now here, you need to understand like the channel strip signal flow. Usually, and that's kind of like the basics, it's really analog mentality. The flow goes from top to bottom. So the X ladder comes here, and then that's your head amp, and then you have your polarity and phantom on that same group. And then you have your digital trim, then your filters, high-pass filters, stuff like that. Then inserts. Inserts can be movable between the chain, and we'll explain about that a little bit later. And then you have your EQ, and then your dynamics that can be moved. Again, I'll explain that later. And then your sense, your panning, and then your output. In this case, goes to stereo, and then your mute and fader, and of course your label here. Again, the dynamics can be pre-EQ or post-EQ. Insert, the same thing. You gotta. Why do we have those options? Now, if you are a guitarist, you'll understand. If you have a pedal board and you put a compressor before the EQ, it will sound really different from flipping those pedals around. So you need to actually find what do you like better on tonality wise, and what can you like, what do you're trying to achieve. My approach, my dynamics are before the EQ, and there's a few reasons why. I like to shape the signal with the compressor, and then once I shape that, then I change the tonality with the EQ. Now I found like sometimes if I have the EQ first, like my EQ shaping will affect the signal that goes into the compressor. So for example, if you are boosting more bottom end, then you're gonna change the settings of the dynamics. So again, you need to find whatever it works for you, but that's my approach. And you need to try it. Just play with them. Some actually change. Like again, that's my, like, I might not have the compressor all the time at the before the EQ. You know, like it all depends on the input, and you need to have a reason why you do it. Okay, so a few things to consider, right, when you're prepping a file. So now that we label everything, everything is all clear and organized, you can start doing things like, okay, let's start from the top, right? Like gains. Now, we don't know the gains of the signal, but you can always put it at, somewhere there, like at -24. You can put all the channels at -24. Just to give you, so when you put the file, at least you see some gain coming into the console. You can start by checking your patch list. You can know what signals you need to have 48 volts. For example, my hats, I need 48 volts. My overheads, my guitar 1 and 3, and that's just going by your input patch, by the device that I'm using. So here, like hats, I'm using a 914, overhead C414s, and so stuff like that. So you know which ones we'll use. Now there's another things like polarity, classic one, like snare bottom is most likely you're gonna reverse the polarity. Like again, if the cable wasn't wired properly or something's dodgy, it won't be like that. But in theory, that's pretty much it. It's always a go-to, but you need to have a listen to it. But I'm just doing things that will save me time while I'm like doing a sound check, or again, there is gonna be times where you're gonna have times like to do a full virtual sound check, like 5 hours of sound check, no problem. But there is gonna be times where you just have like 10 minutes to pull a mix, and you need to. The more things you do now, the more like it's gonna save you. It's gonna set you up for a win. Trims, again, trims. You can do things like guitars, tracks, and everything. I'll put them all to like -10. A few things, but again, you need to know what to do. Like if you have some settings already in your head, then you do it. High-pass filters. So again, things like, okay, kick drums. What do you usually do? And I do, for example, all my kick drums at 40. So then I'll go everything at 40. Snares, I'll do at 80. Top and bottom. My hats at 120. Toms at 80. Overheads at 120, or you can do 80, whatever you want. Anyway, so you can just keep going with that channel. The insert, if you have inserts on or stuff like that. And then EQ. Now with EQ, I try not to do things like this, for example, like now, like because I don't even know what this sounds like. I don't even know the context of the room. I don't know anything. So I literally always start flat. Now, if you have presets that this EQ sounds great on that vocal, or like the tonality of a 58 needs that, then go ahead. But don't just start like thinking, oh yeah, I need less of that. Like actually just wait until you get there into the room and tweak it. But yeah, setting up your high-pass filters, it's gonna set you up for a win. Okay, dynamics, same thing. So if you have some settings that some presets, feel free to load them. Feel free to put them in the right. You want this filter post EQ or pre EQ. So if you already know that, so just go through it and then put it all in. Delay, if you delay things, I like to delay guitars, like one of the guitars, like at 5-7 milliseconds, just to do a little bit of the hash effect on them. So yeah, and then pretty much your mixes. So you start, in this case, we talked about, in this example, I'm gonna do parallel compression. So a few things to do first, take all the drums out of the stereo group and send that drum group, drum channel to both buses. So we'll reroute them. So that's good. Let's go back to and then you're panning. So like already overheads left, right, toms. Pant a little bit here and there. Snare, maybe a little bit, tiny bit. I don't know. Whatever you want to do. Guitars, left, right, center, whatever you want. And then faders. I usually leave the faders all the way down. I don't want to load a file and all of a sudden it just goes mental on the ears or on the PA or monitors. Or again, before you load anything, you definitely need to be aware that to turn everything off, like everything that goes to the outputs. Cool. And then of course, like things here, you patch things in the channels. You go through the list, your input patch, and start patching things. So let's go to the patching section. Oh, here. So the input patch. Now, in this case, because we have so many blanks in here, I literally go to I always the empty channels. I literally take all the channels channel patches. Like I don't want to see any meters that they're not going to the PA. I just don't want to take the risk that someone will push a fader and just go crazy. So I always play it safe. Unpatch the stuff that you don't need, and then just patch the stuff that you really need. Same with your outputs. Like patch the stuff that goes to the places you don't want to have a random feed going somewhere else that you don't even know. So again, that's the stuff that you do in your Showfile prep. Okay, so yeah, so that once you route everything, you can. Once you prep your channels, then let's move on to our VCAs or DCAs. So I create everything labeled. I assigned what I want into here, so I know my drums are my drums, my bass are going for my bass. So that's all all organized. Again, usually DCAs I'll leave them at 0. Always at 0. Cool. Okay, so let's go to our outputs. Okay, so I'm almost there. Okay, so I have my drums in here, my drum groups. So we're doing parallel compression. Now, as I said before, each console is different and each manufacturer is different. So some consoles, like it will allow you to send to a group. In this case, the CL5 doesn't let me, so I gotta cheat the system. So I decided to make the left-right bus the band bus, and then send that band bus to our matrices, our PL left-right matrix. So if you see, like that drum bus goes to a stereo, and then all of them pretty much. If you set up some compressor settings, do it. Now a few things, like for example vocals, right? Like they are not going to the band bus, but I want them to go. If I can send them to another bus in this console, then I'll just send them to the matrix. So you see that bus is going to the matrix, straight to the matrix, so it can be mixed. So that's going there. Same thing, fields, and your program feed. Again, a few things to remember is like when you have a stereo, like a stereo signal outputting to a mono bus, you gotta make sure you put it at -6 a lot of people forget. So then there is a summation when you have two signals going into a mono, then you always have it on -6. So in here MCs, everything at 0, 0, and then in your program feed, I'll just boost it up by 6 dB, just because they will need a little bit extra on that. And here, so my reverb, my effects auxiliaries, again, I don't want those ones to go anywhere. That's just the send. So I want to use that auxiliary to send to effects. So I don't want to go anywhere. So I better take them off the stereo group because they will duplicate. And then in this case, Boxberry, because there is no another group, I can send that group to another group. I'll just send them straight to. Sorry, not that's wrong. So I will need to send the channel to the left-right mix. Okay, so that's done. Okay, so let's go subs in here. So if you have a subs auxiliary, then you'll need to send that to your subs matrix. Now you can do, in this console, you can go from the channel straight to the matrix, but I like it to keep it that way because most of the consoles can do it. So I always want to have that mentality of as an auxiliary. And then your matrix is so PLF, so you can see in here what's sent to that. Subs, fields, blanks. Again, I unrouted everything that is not going anywhere. I took the label off so it's easy to understand. So yeah, so hopefully, if someone jumps on my console, it's really easy to understand. Well, like the whole parallel compression is a little bit complicated, but the whole label and structure of the system is pretty good. Okay, so let's go back to our channels. So yeah, so now if you're doing monitors from front of house, then you can start kind of building your mixes. So maybe you can put all the faders at -10 on your Samsung faders, and then maybe the loudest thing, like for example, if I'm the vocal singer, like I want the vocal channel is gonna be the loudest thing, so that you probably want that fader the loudest. So maybe you put that fader at 0, and then all the mixes down. So at least so when you're already rehearsing, then you have at least something going to the mixes. Okay, so just remember there's a few things like you can do, like if you have access to virtual soundcheck or multi-track records, it's actually really cool. Like you can actually, if you have a console too, like send the signal from that multi-track to the here, and you can actually go through each setting and actually change it, make it pretty much, just as a good basing. And then that will set you up for a win. So then, there was going to be times where you just have the rehearsals, like one rehearsal where you're going to have a good, like the artist come in and then he's never going to turn up doing the shows, like doing the show rehearsals, or you're not going to have show rehearsals. So you got to have, your basing needs to be pretty good. So again, virtual soundcheck is awesome. Now, if you don't have access to virtual soundcheck, there's a few things you can do, and it's actually like I've done it so many times where I just don't have my laptop or don't have just a full rig. I literally have on my iPhone, I have a couple of tracks, a couple of WAV files with a few vocals that I know how they sound, and then use the iPod line, and then just patch the iPod line into the channel, and then tweak that. For example, if I'm tweaking a vocal, then I tweak the reverbs, I tweak all the little settings that like I don't want to spend time doing a sound check. I have a file where I have the kick drum and snare on one side, in each side. So left kick drum, snare on the right, and then that helps me to set up the gates. For example, the kick drum in a bigger room. Snare, setting up the reverbs and like the compressors and things like that. Again, try to get a good quality. Like, don't just use MP3 at 128. Try to use something like a good quality. I know by using the jack on the iPhone is not the greatest, but anyways, it's something. It's gonna help you at least, and that's what we're trying to do. And we're trying to save some time, during your sound check. You don't want to be spending like ages setting up a reverb doing your sound check, or ages trying to get a compressor sounding right. And like, you pretty much what you want is actually start pushing some faders and start like getting the mix all together. Because again, you've done all the pre-work here, which is so important. But yeah, so I think this is it, and hopefully I gave you some ideas. Oh, again, big thing, don't forget to save your file. It's so important to save, and the way I do it, it's in memory. So I always save one here. So always call base and then put a comment in there. I call it prep. Once I finish that, so once I call it, I finished my prepping and everything, I take that, load into the console, and then create a new one that's called like, I don't know, soundcheck version 1. And then every time I do, I kind of, if I have another session, I call it that show version 3 and things like that, so that you have like a multiple stages. And if for some reason files sometimes get corrupted, so you definitely want to have a file that it's already working and it's going properly. So you don't want to start from scratch, like where nothing works. Because it has happened. So yeah, always be prepared with something that when you push the fader, it already sounds like a mix, not just like empty. But yeah, so hopefully this helps you, and yeah, we'll see you next episode. And feel free to send me some questions if you have.